Don't miss the awesome Naruto stories my sister creates. Her last channel was hacked, so to stay in the loop, please subscribe to her new channel. It would mean a lot to her, and you won't regret it. Hello to all lovers of lemon scenes. I invite you all to my boosty so you can watch your favorite Naruto What If stories in complete comfort. A subscription to Naruto Lemon, the first video with a full lemon, is already on my boosty channel. Dare! Instead of attacking the sensei from behind, the Uchiha, with a deft movement, cut the rope on which the bells attached to her belt were hanging, and the next moment the bells flew into the air and fell into the girl's palm. Hatake sighed, putting the kunai away in his pouch. Sasuke and Naruto, realizing that the test was over, stopped their attack. You passed. All three, he said. Hooray! Mikoto beamed. Even the always sullen Sasuke smiled a little. Great! So tomorrow we'll go on our first mission? To the land of birds? Naruto was happy. Kakashi smiled under his mask and scratched the back of his head, realizing that he had been put in an awkward position. Yes, for the first one, he nodded. But you'll have to wait a little to get to the land of birds. First, you will find several ordinary missions inside the village, which you can handle without me. His hand reached into his pouch and pulled out several scrolls, which he tossed to the students. Catching a cat? Mikoto frowned, unrolling the scroll. Help with housework? Naruto was next. Scare away the moles? Sasuke read, staring at his scroll in bewilderment. Here are your assignments for the rest of the week. And then the third Hokage will decide how ready you are for such a long journey, said the copy ninja. Well, when you finish, I will contact you. The next moment, Hatake disappeared, jumping onto the nearest branch as a blurred shadow, and then galloping off somewhere along the treetops. 3 missions, 3 days. Everything is fair, Sasuke shrugged. Well, shall we start tomorrow? Naruto chuckled. I think after what we did today with Kakashi-sensei, we're good for something more important. Catching a cat and other nonsense are trivial matters that can be dealt with in one go. If we complete these missions today, perhaps Old Man Third will think that it's time for us to go on a real mission, Naruto suggested. I like the way you think, Mikoto supported him. Then I'll get busy catching this cat. Great, Sasuke muttered. Then I'll go scare away the moles. It seems that you were blatantly set up, you fool, Kurama grinned. You will dig beds and chop wood. It won't take long with the shadow clones, Naruto reminded him, remembering the 7 of crosses in his deck. Okay, then we'll meet at the residence of Old Man Third, Naruto suggested. Mikoto and Sasuke nodded. Have you found me a new body? The long-haired shinobi asked as soon as Danzo entered his laboratory. It was a gloomy room in the Root's underground base, where Orochimaru could work without fear that anyone would disturb him, a nuke nin. Shimura took care of that. The laboratory was furnished with new electronic instruments, tables with some kind of flasks and test tubes, and a bookcase similar to those that stood in the basement of the library at the Hokage residence. Uchiha Sasuke, in my opinion, is an excellent contender, the old man said and, leaning on a cane, approached the scientist bending over the corpse, whose chest had been opened and from which the third student had for some reason removed internal organs. There is something else. Your rejuvenation technique that you've worked on in the past. I think I know someone who it worked on. Orochimaru looked up from what he was doing, putting down his tools, and looked at Danzo. Surprise flashed in his snake eyes. Impossible, he hissed. Besides, this is not a rejuvenation technique. The user's body must irrevocably return to the state it was in the distant past, but all experience, all knowledge and memories between the present and this point are erased. Danzo slammed his cane on the floor and nodded, understanding how the technique worked. Everything was coming together. Why is it impossible? He asked. Orochimaru hesitated to answer. There was a mistake in my technique. All test subjects died. I don't think anyone could fix it or finish it, the snake Sannin said. I think Uzumaki Naruto did it, Danzo muttered, taking out a charred map from his cloak, picked up at the place where Itachi Uchiha committed massacre of his parents, and handing it to his colleague. I had my doubts, but after seeing him in action, I'm pretty sure it was him. He accepted it, thoughtfully examining the seal preserved on the surviving piece of chakra-conducting paper. Orochimaru couldn't believe his ears. A Jinchuriki who was completely mediocre in ninjutsu and genjutsu was able to do something like this at that age? This technique was one of the Nukanin's first attempts to gain immortality, even when he grimaced at the thought of moving to another body. If he had figured out how to finish it then, he might have found a way to his own rejuvenation without memory loss. I need proof that the technique worked. You have it. Mikoto Uchiha, Sasuke's mother. The girl, the third member of Team Kakashi, which includes Naruto and Sasuke, is her. I compared the girl's blood sample with all the blood samples in the Uchiha clan. One matched him perfectly. Orochimaru nodded. Technically, she's not Sasuke's mother anymore, he muttered. For her body, a boy never grew in her womb. This is the body of a girl, torn from her own past. Interesting. I'll have to look into it. Danzo didn't mind. I have more than kept my end of the bargain, he said coldly. And I won't forget about mine. The Sharingans for your new arm will be ready for transplant very soon. I need to dig a little more into the genes of the first and Shin, and when everything is ready, I won't leave you in the cold, Orochimaru replied. He coughed loudly, covered his mouth with his hand, and winced. When the snake Sannin looked at his gloved hand, he realized that not only was the corpse's blood on it, but also his own. It's time for me to return to the Hidden Sound Village, he hissed, pushing away the table with the mutilated corpse and bloody instruments. Taking off his gloves, he casually threw them there. Tell your people that you can start cleaning. Okay, Orochimaru. Don't forget who you serve, Danzo nodded and turned around and headed towards the exit. Otherwise Hiruzen and everyone else will very quickly find out where you do most of your experiments. A look full of irritation shot him in the back. The snake Sannin really did not like such phrases. He served only himself. And Danzo was only a caring sponsor, for whose sake he didn't mind getting his hands dirty from time to time. I won't forget. The sun was slowly setting. With him, the Genin's first day as team number 7 was coming to an end. None of the trio suspected that he was being quietly followed everywhere by an observer, Kakashi Hatake, who decided to see how his new students would cope with the task. To be honest, he was already very impressed with what they showed in the test. Sasuke, Mikoto, and Naruto turned out to be very capable guys. Each of them, in addition to basic shinobi skills, had some fighting techniques in their arsenal, although this does not always happen after graduating from the academy. Uchiha Sasuke confirmed the title of the best student of the academy. Mastering the Great Fireball at such an age is a great achievement. Mikoto, who already knew 2 lightning release techniques, showed herself no worse. And Naruto, who used cards in battle, which Kakashi warned the third about in advance, also aroused some admiration and curiosity among the Jounin. Although Uzumaki was, according to the Hokage, completely untalented in ninjutsu, he demonstrated that he could use it without any difficulty if he had the right card. Minato-sensei's son. He has very interesting abilities, Hatake noted to himself and directed his gaze to where he noticed surveillance some time ago. However, the old man left his post as observer immediately after the end of the test. Didn't you come to watch him, Danzo-sama? And even if you don't pay attention to their personal achievements, the guys demonstrated excellent teamwork, which was much more important. Naturally. Hatake did not care how spontaneously the students united. What was important was the result, which exceeded all his expectations. I wonder how they will cope with basic missions without my guidance. Kakashi wondered and decided to test this in practice, ready to intervene if something happened. Now, when his shadow clone distracted the genin's attention by galloping far, far through the treetops, the real copy ninja hid in the foliage, watching the actions of his students. Did they decide to hit the ground running and split the task? Hatake couldn't believe his eyes. The first genin in my memory to do something like that. Deciding that he had to see this, Kakashi decided to follow each of his new students. To do this, he had to again resort to the shadow cloning technique, which made Hatake happily remember that he practically did not use other techniques while training students. Still, the technique was too expensive in terms of chakra. The first clone followed Mikoto, who, quickly reaching the customer's house, knocked and asked the woman more about the lost cat. Nodding and promising to do something, the Uchiha just as quickly left, immediately starting to search. To do this, she had to climb onto an electric pole to inspect the area from a higher point. Running up to the vantage point, the girl began to peer into the roofs of the houses. But there was no cat nearby. Then she jumped onto the nearest roof and ran further, looking for traces that could help find the lost animal. Mikoto was lucky, because very soon she discovered a half-eaten pigeon, sprawled on slate cracked from time and the feet of the same shinobi as the Uchiha. And soon the cat herself was found, sitting on a tree branch in the yard and licking her lips contentedly. The cat had either eaten too much or was simply not agile enough for Mikoto. She was unable to escape. Not bad, Kakashi thought, evaporating in a white cloud of smoke. The next one to complete the mission was Sasuke. Arriving where the owners of a large plot of land with a once neat lawn, strawberry beds and flower beds were being pestered by moles that had ruined the garden with their burrows, the Uchiha promised to get rid of the pests. The woman, who had already used the help of genin, was surprised that Sasuke was working alone, but had nothing against it. Borrowing a watering can from the barn, the Uchiha flooded all the holes he could find, plugging them with stones. To be sure, he built several scarers from metal rods stuck into the ground and spinners from plastic bottles, which made noise in the wind, driving away sensitive animals. I got it done quickly, Hatake noted, assessing the size of the garden and the time the Uchiha spent on his mission. And finally, Naruto. When Kakashi arrived at a long overgrown site on the outskirts of the village that needed to be brought back to life, he found Uzumaki arguing with an old customer. "I just missed you here," grumbled the grandfather, who recognized in the young genin not only the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but also the boy who brutally dealt with the maniac who killed a girl in a Konoha park. "You don't understand, grandfather, I'm talking about the mission," Naruto exclaimed, showing him the scroll. "Where are your teacher and partners in this case? Shouldn't there be 3 genin?" asked the old man, frowning, but lowering the gun, which he had previously been holding at the ready. Naruto grinned as he pulled out a card. "This system is a little outdated. I can handle it faster alone. Shadow cloning technique," he exclaimed, and white smoke came out of the card he was holding in his hand, transforming into many copies of Naruto appearing in front of the farmer. He raised his gun again. "What kind of witchcraft?" he said indignantly, and Naruto wondered if the farmer really did not know about shinobi techniques or was simply affected by senile insanity. "Calm down, grandfather, just let me complete the mission and I'll go home," Naruto asked in a somewhat irritated voice. In the end, the farmer agreed, giving the genin a pruning shears, a scythe, a rake, several shovels and an axe, and quickly ducking into the house, locking the door from the inside. Some of Naruto's clones began digging up the beds and clearing the area of excess grass and weeds, and he himself began chopping firewood while the remaining shadow copies piled them under a special canopy. Finally, the work was completed. All the clones scattered, and Naruto, who was overcome by fatigue, took a deep breath, looking around the tidied-up area with a dozen new beds, grass cut and stacked in several piles, chopped firewood, gooseberry and currant bushes tied up and rid of dried branches. Having placed all the tools at the porch, he hurried to leave this place. After hard work, he still had to meet with his teammates and go to the third Hokage with a report on the missions completed. Impressive. He can create many more clones than I can. It's incredible how much chakra he has. Kakashi thought, looking up from the book in his hand and watching the whole thing, sitting on the roof of the house, leaning his back against the brick chimney. Arriving at the Hokage residence, our heroes met Shikamaru's team leaving the third's office. "Oh, hi Naruto," the Nara greeted. "And I thought we were the first to complete the mission on our first day of work." "We already have 3 of them," Uzumaki responded, showing his friend 3 scrolls. Ino and Choji looked at each other with very puzzled expressions on their faces. Shikamaru's widened eyes also quite accurately demonstrated his surprise. "Very impressive," said Asuma Sarutobi, who was accompanying his team. "That explains why Kakashi is already waiting for you along with the third." Having said goodbye, Asuma's team moved on, and our heroes looked at each other. Is Kakashi-sensei waiting for us with the third? Was he really watching how we carried out our tasks? We saw how he ran away, Mikoto squeezed out. "You can expect anything from a jonin," Sasuke responded. "I think it was another test." Naruto, unable to find the right words, silently stepped forward and pushed the door. When our heroes found themselves in the third's office, they became convinced that Hatake was present there. "And here you are," he looked around. "I was just telling Hokage-sama about your successes." Approaching the table where a smiling Hiruzen sat smoking a pipe, the trio stopped and Naruto placed 3 scrolls in front of the Hokage. "Mission completed," he reported. "Yes, I found out before Kakashi arrived." Sarutobi nodded at the crystal ball lying on a red velvet pillow on the corner of the table. Naruto remembered that the third had a unique tracking technique that required this device. An unpleasant chill ran down his spine at the thought that the Hokage could have been watching him all the time. "The only thing you lacked was persecution mania," Kurama growled. "I don't think the old man would interfere so much in your life. He's too busy a man for that." The Uzumaki calmed down, thinking that the fox was right. "Congratulations, you are the most successful genin team in the village so far. And Kakashi and I were just discussing whether you deserve a chance to prove yourself in something more serious," Hiruzen said, looking at the 3 genin from under the brim of his hat. Kakashi also looked at the students, noticing how they simultaneously held their breath. He smiled under his mask. "I think you deserve it. Therefore, tomorrow your first real mission awaits you. I must warn you, the path is long and dangerous. You must obey your sensei in everything. And, of course, prepare better," the Hokage said after a short pause, causing sighs of relief from the genin. "We'll meet tomorrow at dawn at the main gate," Kakashi added, accepting a new scroll from the third. "Don't be late." After saying goodbye to the Hokage, sensei and teammates, Naruto walked home. He was in no hurry, since it was already dark outside, and, as mentioned earlier, walking in the dark gave Uzumaki special pleasure. And even that terrible incident in the park did not change this. During them he thought better. And now Uzumaki was deep in thought. Today brought him a lot of new impressions. And life, it seems, has become not as gray and joyless as in the past. He managed to please the Hokage and the new teacher, made a new friend in Mikoto, and Sasuke seemed to be not such an ass as Uzumaki had previously thought. They managed to work well together. The main thing is that this attitude accompanies them on their first serious mission, on which they will be accompanied by new dangers. Beyond the walls of Konoha lay a new world, by no means so hospitable. And from Kurama's stories, the genin knew that terrible things like the 2 that happened in his life happened behind these walls every day. His path, as usual, ran through the Konoha cemetery, where Naruto visited at least once a week. And now he stopped in front of the tombstone, on which was written, Haruno Sakura, beloved daughter and friend, stood for a while, and, promising himself to be strong in the difficult time ahead, moved on, dissolving into the dark street, which had been on for several weeks. The lights didn't shine. The rain drummed on the tent stretched between the tree trunks, under which our heroes decided to take shelter and rest a little. Thick dark gray endless clouds crawled across the sky, visible through the foliage and pine needles closing over the heads of the travelers. Inclement weather caught Team 7 off guard halfway to their destination, Bird Country. It was a small country located between the country of wind and the country of earth. Naruto and his comrades, who went outside Konoha for the first time, knew little about her. You could say that today they saw the world for the first time beyond the walls that had protected them all this time. On the way to the border of the Land of Fire, in which the traveler's home village was located, Kakashi and his students managed to visit several settlements, and in one of them they even had a snack and a little rest. The genin were surprised to note that these villages were not as large as the Hidden Leaf village, and there were much fewer people in them. The houses were much more modest. As a rule they did not exceed a height of 2 floors, the street seemed small, dirty and uncomfortable. But the prices for products were significantly lower, which Team Number 7 could not help but take advantage of. By evening, they crossed the border and found themselves in a neighboring country, the capital of which was the Hidden Grass village. It was from there, as Naruto remembered, that the criminal he killed, who killed Sakura, was from. Fortunately, the path of our heroes did not pass through this place. They walked through fields with grass taller than a man, sparse forests, crossed several rivers, and then found themselves in a neighboring state, where they made a halt. Amigakure is nearby, Kakashi said when it was decided to stop in a small undergrowth and set up camp. Hidden Rain Village. That explains why this rain doesn't stop, muttered Mikoto, sitting on the camp foam, looking thoughtfully at the sky from under the awning, moving her bangs to the side, which fell onto the protector on her forehead. The girl was still wearing the same black sleeveless t-shirt and dark gray shorts to mid-thigh. Due to the cold, stockings were added to them, rising just above the knee, and sandals were replaced by boots. The distance between the stocking and shorts on the right leg was wrapped with white bandages, to which a holster for kunai and shuriken was attached to a special strap. The second leg in this area was bare, as were the arms, and because of the sometimes strong wind rushing between the tree trunks and, including under the awning, the young Uchiha was cold. She pulled her legs towards her, hugging them with her arms to somehow warm up. A very telling name. Suitable for this place. Maybe it would have been better for us to stay in the village? We could find a hotel there, Sasuke asked, turning to Kakashi, who was also distracted by the clouds floating across the sky. No, I don't think that's a good idea. It just so happened that in the past we fought with this village. Even though Hanzo-sama and I are at peace now, our shinobi prefer to avoid this place. He glanced at the Uchiha, who nodded understandingly. Sasuke wasn't afraid of the cold. Or at least, unlike Mikoto, it wasn't noticeable to him. The Uchiha was wearing a dark blue t-shirt with the clan symbol on the back, white shorts with a kunai holster attached to the bandages, and ninja sandals. It seemed that the genin didn't care whether he spent the night in the cozy walls or in the open air. Like the rest, if, of course, it weren't for the terrible bad weather. This was good, since shinobi were not supposed to be tied to warmth and comfort. Hatake smiled once again under his mask, noting that he had found a surprisingly good team of genin. Are these clouds or is it getting dark? Asked Naruto, sitting next to Mikoto on the camp foam and shuffling the cards in his hands. Uzumaki was the only one of the trio to dress for the weather. He wore black trousers, a dark green t-shirt with a yellow Konoha symbol on the chest, and a gray jacket with the red spiral of the Uzumaki clan on the back and shoulders, which the boy only buttoned when the wind was strong. It's getting dark, Hatake said. We have been on the road all day since the morning. I think there is no point in going further. We'll spend the night here, and tomorrow we'll move on. The whole day? I didn't even notice, the Jinchuriki thought in surprise. Maybe it's because we made stops along the way. Thank you for your training. They have significantly increased your threshold for fatigue, Kurama answered him in a bored voice. It seemed that the Nine-Tails' mood depended greatly on the weather. And now he was in sync with the melancholy and despondency brought on by the endless rain. You can't even make a fire, Mikoto muttered regretfully. I wouldn't mind some hot tea. The Uzumaki smiled contentedly as this was another great chance to show off. Taking out a card from his pouch, he made a seal of concentration, and a thermos filled with a hot drink appeared in front of him. In the same way, some time ago he printed foam mats and an awning, which came in very handy. Catch it, he threw the thermos to the girl, and she deftly caught it, unscrewing the lid and pouring tea into it. Taking a sip, the Uchiha winced, but, noticing that Naruto was looking at her, she smiled. Thank you. Very useful, she said. Ha ha ha. It seems your tea wasn't to everyone's taste, Kurama chuckled as Sasuke, who was given a thermos, choked on the drink as it was too strong. What can I do? I've never drank tea. Plain water is what I like. If it weren't for your advice, I wouldn't have started doing this at all, responded Uzumaki, remembering that the Nine-Tails helped him in his preparations, advising him what was best: take it with you and seal it in cards. When the thermos, passed around the circle, reached Kakashi, the students looked carefully at the sensei, waiting for him to lower his mask and they would finally see his face. But Hatake refused, returning the vessel to the owner and, in order to quickly change the topic of conversation, looked with interest at the fair-haired boy. An interesting technique, he remarked, watching as Naruto used the same Mito technique to seal the thermos back into the card. Oh, this is my ace in the hole, Uzumaki smiled, showing Kakashi a card, on the back of which, after the thermos disappeared in a puff of white smoke, a seal flashed for a moment. A universal technique that helps to seal and unseal things and techniques. How does it work? Kakashi asked. With things it's simple, but with techniques it's more interesting. There are two variations of sealing them. Or I use the technique myself, after which I continue it with a sealing combination of hand seals, the Jinchuriki explained with some pride. Or I complete the combination of seals a little differently, and then the card seals the technique that it sees. By the way, it was in the second way that the genin borrowed the smoke curtain technique from the training Chunin. They were a little surprised that some part of this jutsu was suddenly sucked into the bushes. Naruto still smiled, remembering their faces. Once the technique has been sealed, I can use it an unlimited number of times. Just a concentration seal is enough, Naruto finished, his eyes sparkling with satisfaction as even Sasuke looked at him with some respect. You could say that the card does not seal the equipment, but rather remembers it. Interesting. In some ways, this technique is very reminiscent of the Sharingan, Hatake thought. Is it possible to seal people in it? Asked Sasuke, who was sitting on the second foam with his sensei and looking with interest at the six of spades in his teammate's hand. Do you want us to check? Naruto answered the question with a question, not for the first time during their journey making a joke like this. Sasuke looked away in irritation. Mikoto laughed. Even Kakashi seemed to smile under his mask again. Our heroes spent the night in the same place, sitting on rugs and placing backpacks and other things under their heads. Naruto, lying on the edge, did not fall asleep for a long time. His eyes, accustomed to the darkness, watched the drops falling down from the edge of the awning. Slipping and falling, they crashed into burdock leaves, exploding into many even smaller droplets. This seemingly simple and unremarkable sight fascinated our hero so much that when he looked up from what he was doing, everyone else was already asleep. He quietly got up and, buttoning his jacket, walked out from under the canopy into the rain, after which he pushed off the ground and soared upward, towards the cold drops. Jump after jump, from branch to branch, and finally he found himself at the top of a tall spruce. He climbed here, hoping that at least somewhere the clouds would thin out and he would be able to see the stars. Naruto wondered if they were the same here and in Konoha. Looking at the night sky in his native village, Uzumaki roughly knew the location of the night stars and thought that here at the same time it might be slightly different. But only disappointment awaited our hero, as the stars were hidden behind an impenetrable haze. But Uzumaki looked around the surroundings, remembering which direction they came from, and saw in the distance a cluster of lights with towers as tall as trees. This was probably the same Amage cure that Kakashi was talking about. The rain got heavier. Somewhere in the distance, electrical discharges of lightning flashed in the sky, then a couple of moments later thunder was heard, which almost caused the boy to fall from his vantage point. Feeling that in pursuit of his strange ideas he would soon get completely wet, Uzumaki went back down. "Why do not you sleep?" asked the sensitive Kakashi, dozing half-lying, leaning his back on a stump. As soon as Naruto returned, he opened his eye. "Yes, I wanted to see something," Naruto replied, returning to his mat. He glanced at Sasuke, sleeping on his back with his hands behind his head, and then at Mikoto, curled up on her rug. "Doesn't matter." Uzumaki lay down and fell asleep very soon. Kakashi sighed, thoughtfully looking at the almost finished book lying on the grass nearby, and also decided to plunge into the arms of Morpheus. Then the pair of amber eyes that had been watching the camp of Team Number 7 from the darkness went out. "I'll continue tomorrow. I've learned enough," a quiet voice hissed. The long-haired man in black pants and a gray kimono tied with a purple belt, who was the mysterious observer, turned into several snakes that immediately slithered away into the darkness. A gloomy figure in a black cloak with red clouds stood on the head of a huge gargoyle, a statue adorning the tallest tower in the village. The droplets shooting from the night sky, in which the thick clouds had dissolved, did not bother the red-haired man in the least, whose pale face was decorated, or rather disfigured, by many chakra receptacles. Two purple lights lit up in the darkness. Akatsuki opened his eyes, which saw everything that was happening in the village and, thanks to the rain, felt everything and everyone outside of it. He saw him, a fair-haired boy with stripes on his cheeks. The Jinchuriki was not alone, probably with the team. A jonin, and a very strong one at that, accompanied the boy. He was not a serious obstacle, but now it was very inopportune. Pain did not want to draw Konoha's attention to the Amage cure. And the disappearance of the Hidden Leaf team on the way through Amage cure could have attracted him. The illusion that Hanzo was still in charge of the village allowed Amage cure to prosper and allowed him to carry out all his plans without any difficulty. "The Nine Tails," the man said, looking into the empty dark streets stretching below. "Did you feel something, Pain?" Another figure in the same cloak appeared from behind. This blue-haired girl with a beautiful but sad face and amber eyes walked out onto the balcony from which the statue grew. "Kyubi. He's here," he said without turning around. "Should I go after him?" the girl asked. "No, it's not worth it, Conan," Pain answered, feeling that the chakra of the Nine Tails, which he sensed, was hidden from the omnipresent rain. "I have another task for you. Contact Itachi, I have business with him." "But how?" "Let Amaya and Kanoji take care of this," Akatsuki said in a voice that warned of all further objections. He closed his eyes again to remember in every detail what he had felt a few moments ago. "Don't touch anyone except the Jinchuriki. However, let them do everything so that they are not recognized as ninjas from AIM." Hataki raised the students early in the morning. Team number 7 had to quickly get ready and, without breakfast, set off again. The closer the travelers approached the border of the land of birds, the weaker the rain became. Blue gaps appeared ahead, through which the bright rays of the sun penetrated. Finally, Mikoto said with pleasure in her voice, smiling when the rain and clouds were completely left behind and the sky cleared. The world around seemed to instantly transform, turning from dirty and gloomy landscapes into something beautiful. Ahead lay rice fields, forests with bright green foliage and hills completely covered with wondrous flowers. Naruto looked at her and involuntarily smiled, feeling that his soul was becoming lighter when he saw this blissful face. He glanced at Sasuke, who seemed indifferent to the change in scenery. The Uchiha walked with the same gloomy face as before. The Uzumaki thought about teasing his comrade again with a joke, but ultimately decided not to get on his nerves. Here is the country of birds. Very soon we will be there, Kakashi delighted his students. By the way, Kakashi-sensei, what exactly is our mission? Naruto asked, thinking that he was a little late with such a question. Everything is very simple. Deliver this to the client, Hatake explained, taking out a scroll tied with a red ribbon, which indicated the special importance of the information hidden inside. And what's in the scroll? Sasuke asked, casting an indifferent glance at a flock of birds flying in the sky, who were chirping loudly, rejoicing at the marvelous morning. I don't know, Kakashi responded. Perhaps personal correspondence. Maybe secret information about some people. Maybe some techniques. So let's see. Mikoto suggested and immediately earned a mocking and at the same time reproachful look from the teacher. It is forbidden. Another rule that shinobi must follow. We are just couriers, he said. By the way, in the Chunin exam, which you will take part in sooner or later, there will probably be a similar test. You need to get a scroll in addition to the one you have, and deliver it to the right place. Many people fail this stage because of their curiosity. The girl sighed, taking note of this. Exam? How soon? Sasuke asked, looking at the copy ninja with interest. It usually takes place once a year. I don't think you should participate this year, but we'll see. In any case, we still have time. Don't worry, I'll prepare you, the Jounin responded. Besides missions, the life of a shinobi is constant training. You will also need to be prepared for this when we return to Konoha. They crossed an area of rice fields, following a winding path that soon disappeared back into the forest. When our heroes, drying in the sun, were again hidden by the shadow of the crowns of the trees that appeared on the sides, Mikoto sighed in disappointment. Maybe we can practice right now? Suggested Naruto. Show us a couple of tricks. Hatake looked around and shook his head. We'd better finish the matter and deal with it on the way back, he replied. They're probably waiting for us. Let's hurry up. They sped up, starting to run, and for a while there was silence, broken only by the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves and the stomping of feet. Kakashi-sensei, why did Hokage-sama hesitate before giving us this mission? Asked Mikoto. It seems like nothing complicated. It's the same as chasing a cat, only longer, Sasuke supported her. Hatake smiled under his mask. Depending on the level of importance and danger for the performer, missions are divided into ranks D, C, B, A and S. The missions within the village that you carried out were rank D missions, elementary tasks that any team of genin could handle. The tasks outside the village are more difficult than they seem at first glance. Even just delivering scrolls like this. Our mission would have been AC rank had we gone to one of the neighboring villages. But our path extends much further and runs through, one might say, enemy territory. The chance of colliding with other ninjas is quite high, hence the mission is quite dangerous. If I were you, I would only be glad that we have been lucky enough not to run into anyone yet. So we're on a B rank mission? Naruto clarified. Exactly. From this we can conclude that our scroll does not contain important political information, otherwise the rank of the mission would be even higher. And you wouldn't be allowed to see her. It is so customary that rank B missions are carried out by shinobi who have received the rank of Chunin. An exception has been made for you. And missions of rank A and S are usually carried out by jonins, the teacher answered, stopping. Well. The genins also stopped. What's happened? Mikoto was surprised. I remember this tree. We've already run through here, Sasuke said, glancing sideways at the willow tree bending over the road. This can't be, the road goes straight, Naruto was surprised. It's a genjutsu, genius. You're caught, Kurama growled. Get ready for battle. It seems someone is very interested in finding out what's in your scroll. As soon as the Ninetales addressed his Jinchuriki, Kakashi pulled out a kunai and made a seal of concentration. I got too carried away by the story. Unwind, he said, freeing himself from the power of the genjutsu. The students repeated after him, and the next moment everything around changed. They found themselves in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. The tree leaning over the missing road disappeared, and in its place two figures appeared on the path of our heroes. It was a man and a girl. The man was quite tall and broad-shouldered, with an unpleasant appearance, a stern oval face, a scar crossing his lips on the right side of his large nose, and deep-set gray eyes. The shinobi's short brown hair fell over his forehead protector, which had a crossed-out symbol resembling an unfinished arrow. The stranger was wearing blue trousers and a military vest like Kakashi's, only black, worn over a blue t-shirt. On the ninja's left shoulder was a tattoo in the shape of a compass. In addition to the standard ninja equipment, a sheath with a kukri was attached to the stranger's belt. This shinobi looked to be about 30, if not 40 years old. The few shallow wrinkles on his face were misleading. The man's green-haired companion, on the contrary, seemed very fragile, no older than 20. She was short, wearing a black tight-fitting suit, with a bob haircut. She had expressive eyes of an unusual yellow color, graceful faces, thin lips, which were emphasized by purple lipstick. On the kunoichi's forehead was a protector with the same crossed-out symbol. Nukenin from Takigakure? You guys have climbed too far, Kakashi said, throwing the kunai and taking it with a reverse grip. For some reason, the two strangers' gaze was fixed on Naruto, who swallowed, feeling awkward. For the first time since the incident in the park, he felt his legs trembling again. The fear that Uzumaki had seemingly gotten rid of returned. It seemed that Sasuke and Mikoto felt the same way when facing a serious enemy for the first time. Then the green-haired girl, taking her eyes off the Uzumaki, looked at Kakashi standing in front and saw a scroll sticking out of his pocket. Scroll. Give it to us, she said, holding out her hand demandingly. I was daydreaming, Hatake grinned, slapping his pocket. My name is Amaya, the girl's eyes narrowed. For some reason she added. Amaya from Waterfall. Does this name mean anything to you? Kakashi shrugged, making it clear that the girl's celebrity had passed him by. Let's smear them, Kanoji, Amaya hissed, nodding to her partner and jumping back. Water release, sticky trap. He exclaimed, making seals and spewing water from his mouth, which flowed in a wave over the grass, covering it with some kind of white mucus. Everyone back. Kakashi commanded. The genin suddenly came to their senses, jumping to a safe distance. Mikoto armed herself with shurikens, Sasuke took a fighting stance, and Naruto prepared to grab the card at any moment. Kakashi remained in place and made seals with lightning speed, after which he slammed his palm onto the ground. Earth element, stone wall. The ground cracked, and a 3-meter barrier came out of it, meeting the wave of sticky water and preventing it from flowing further. The wave crashed into the wall and hardened on it in the form of something resembling polyurethane foam. Kakashi jumped back to his students, covering them with his back and waiting for the enemies to overcome this obstacle. This is your chance, Naruto. Replenish your deck with new techniques, Kurama growled. You're right, Uzumaki formed a combination of hand seals and took out a map, pointing it at the stone wall. But just at that moment a girl in a black tight suit landed on the barrier and hit it with her hand. Secret compression technique. Amaya exclaimed, and the next moment the wall from which she immediately jumped turned into a small pebble that fell onto the grass. Kanoji, running straight through the white sticky mucus and not experiencing any discomfort thanks to the chakra passed through his soles, realized that there was no longer an obstacle between him and his enemies, and prepared to use a new technique. Amaya at this time dived her hand into her pouch and pulled out several shuriken from there, immediately throwing them at Kakashi and his students. Action, Naruto. The Nine-Tails again pulled Uzumaki out of his stupor caused by surprise at the demonstrated technique. The Jinchuriki nodded, fortunately no one noticed. He put his hand in his pocket, replacing the card with the new technique with several new cards. When Kakashi, reflecting all the shuriken with a kunai, moved a little to the side, clearing the way, Uzumaki, soaking the cards with chakra, threw them at the enemies. Illuminated in purple, the cards rushed towards Amaya, who had no choice but to jump out of the way. Kanoji, interrupting the combination of seals, pulled out a kukri and was about to deflect or cut the projectiles flying at him with his weapon, but then Naruto made a seal of concentration. Nuknin managed to take a step back before the cards exploded at the owner's behest, stunning the enemy for a few moments and burning him a little. This was enough for Sasuke and Mikoto to fight. Fire release, great fireball! Exclaimed the Uchiha, exhaling a huge sphere of fire at the enemy. As soon as the enemy disappeared into it, Mikoto, remembering where the enemy was standing, threw shuriken. When the technique went out, the genin saw Kanoji jumping back a few steps. His clothes were slightly blackened, and shurikens protruded from his military vest, hitting the target but causing absolutely no damage. Amaya, in turn, grabbed a new portion of shuriken and was ready to send them to the shinobi from Konoha, but then Naruto saved the day by throwing the six of diamonds towards her and reactivating the card with the seal of concentration. Fire release, curtain of smoke. He said, and black smoke came out of the card, filling everything around Amaya and preventing her from seeing and making it difficult for her to breathe. Kakashi nodded approvingly and rushed towards his coughing victim, diving straight into the cloud of black smoke, which was not such a problem for him thanks to the mask hiding his face. It looks like the enemy managed to arm herself with a kunai. A ringing sound was heard, but our heroes were unable to intervene, since Kanoji, who had thrown the kukri into the ground so that the blade of the knife stuck into it, made the seals again. Water element, sea monster fin. A new wave, emerging directly from the white slime that stained the clearing, rushed straight towards Sasuke in the form of a fin, the edge of which was sharp like a razor. Naruto and Mikoto looked in horror at the technique, which moved at lightning speed and did not give them a chance to intervene. The Uchiha should have been cut in half and seemed to accept his fate by closing his eyes, but no. This turned out not to be the case. When he opened them again, the Sharingan with two tomo was burning in his eyes. At the last moment, instantly calculating the time remaining before the collision with the technique, the Uchiha jumped to the side, and the sharp ridge never touched him. Meanwhile, the black cloud dissipated, and Kakashi and Amaya, who were fighting blindly, saw each other, spinning in an even more fierce dance of death. Having collided with their blades for the last time, they bounced off in different directions. But the kunoichi from Waterfall managed to dive into her pouch with her free hand and pull out a wire with which, having soaked it in chakra, she tried to bind the enemy. Throwing her hand forward, the green-haired girl said, "Chains of pain." The shuriken with a wire tied to it flew away somewhere to the side and, before Kakashi had time to understand anything, flew around him several times, pulling him tightly with a metal thread along his arms and legs. Gotcha! Triumphant lights sparkled in Amaya's eyes. She pulled the wire towards herself to cut the enemy into pieces, but at the last moment he turned into a log. The wire turned the log into several wooden pancakes that fell to the ground, and the next moment Amaya turned around, hearing a sound reminiscent of chirping. She saw Kakashi on a tree branch. In his hand he clutched a sparkling lightning bolt. The next moment, the jounin took off, pushing off the branch with his feet, and flew straight towards his opponent. If it were not for the amazing flexibility and dexterity of the girl in a tight black suit, then she would be pierced through and through. But the kunoichi from Waterfall was not so simple. At the last moment, she leaned to the side, spinning on one heel, letting Kakashi pass her, and even managed to snatch the scroll from his pocket. After extinguishing the lightning, Hatake turned around and saw the satisfied face of the green-haired thief. "Do you want your scroll? Well, go and get it." The girl deftly tossed the prey into the air, made familiar seals, and the next moment the scroll shrank, turning into something resembling spurs rolled into a roll, which academy students prepare on a small piece of paper. Before Kakashi could do anything, the precious scroll fell into the girl's mouth, after which she swallowed it. Realizing that the enemy was much stronger than he had expected, Kakashi lifted the protector that had slid down, showing his second eye, in which the activated Sharingan was burning. The kunoichi seemed very surprised as her yellow eyes widened. "Are you really that copy ninja Kakashi?" "Oh, Angel-sama, you will be very pleased with me," the yellow-eyed girl purred, rushing forward. She jumped, and a small but surprisingly strong leg slammed into Hataki's chest, throwing him back. Amaya made a concentration seal with her hand, and Kakashi heard a pop behind him. It was his stone wall that returned to its original size, and very inappropriately. The next moment, the jounin crashed into his own technique with his back, feeling something crunch in his back. The stone wall cracked, falling apart into pebbles, and Hatake slid down it onto the grass, breathing deeply to relieve the pain. "Sensei!" Naruto and Mikoto exclaimed in unison, not knowing what to do, whether to help Sasuke or go to Kakashi's rescue. The Uchiha was busy with his own affairs and did not pay attention to anyone around. Jumping to his feet, Sasuke formed new seals, looking only at his enemy. "Fire release, Phoenix flame projectiles," he said, breathing out many fireballs the size of soccer balls at Kanoji this time. The enemy realized that it was useless to dodge, and again resorted to the help of technology. "Water element, water wall." He again spewed water from his mouth, which, rising in the form of a wall, absorbed the fiery blows. This time, Mikoto, who had made her choice, entered the game, throwing a kunai into the water barrier and quickly making hand seals. "Lightning release, chain reaction," she exclaimed, causing electricity to flash at the tip of the thrown weapon. The lightning came into contact with the water, and the nuke Nin from Hidden Waterfall Village was thrown back. The water hit the ground, turning into another puddle. Looking at the enemy stretched out on the ground, the girl grinned contentedly. Overcoming all fear, she formed a new combination of seals, and lightning enveloped her palm. "I'll finish with him." "Lightning release, sharp claw of a panther," she said and, forgetting about everything, rushed towards the enemy. "Mikoto, no!" Kakashi shouted to Naruto, who was about to help, remembering the slime covering the clearing, but it was too late. The girl stuck her saws to the ground right in front of the enemy, while her enemy, from whose body smoke was still rising into the air, managed to successfully rise and smile triumphantly. "Water element, water prison!" exclaimed the nuke Nin, putting his hand in front of him and creating a sphere of water that instantly swallowed Mikoto. After the red lights of the Sharingan with the same two tomo lit up in the black eyes of the trapped Uchiha, her technique gave her a good shock and instantly knocked her out. Sasuke muttered, jumping out of his seat. Before Naruto could turn his head to see his comrade's face, he was already behind the enemy, having managed not to fall into the same sticky trap along the way. "Lion!" The Uchiha appeared behind the nuke Nin, but did not have time to finish, much less attack him with his foot, because a powerful fist crashed into his stomach. From the white slime behind Kanoji, a water clone prepared in advance by the nuke Nin emerged and met Sasuke face to face. When the Uchiha fell to his knees, bent in half, the clone instantly finished him off with a kick to the face, instantly bloodying his nose and causing the unfortunate genin to fly back and hit the back of his head on a tree trunk. "It seems you lost, Kakashi, Amaya grinned, watching from the side as her partner dealt with the genin. There are only 2 of you left. Hatake rose to his feet, gritting his teeth under his mask from the pain coursing through his body. He looked back at Naruto, who was shaking with rage. I underestimated these 2. Naruto clearly wouldn't last a minute against such an opponent, flashed through his head. I am your enemy. Look at me. Amaya exclaimed. As soon as Hatake turned to face her, he was met by her foot. A blade extended from the toe of the kunoichi's boot, and the girl's lips whispered. Wind release, air kill. The blow, accelerated by the push of wind elemental chakra, was simply impossible to reflect, even with the Sharingan. The blade pierced Kakashi's stomach, although Hatake was saved from most of the blade by his military vest. However, the sharp tip caused a very deep wound and caused bleeding. Wincing, the copy ninja felt blood seep through his turtleneck. Sensei! Naruto shouted again, not knowing whether Hatake would recover from such a blow, but did not come to the rescue. His own opponent was waiting for him. Kanoji's water clone burst, spreading in a puddle on the ground, and the Nukenin himself deactivated the technique, allowing the ingested water and the electrocuted Mikoto to fall onto the grass. The shinobi grinned, stepping over the girl's body and slowly moving towards the boy. It's you that I need, he muttered, smiling evilly. The Uzumaki instantly armed himself with cards in both hands, and a whole hail of cutting cards soaked in purple chakra fell on the enemy moving towards him. But Naruto was too angry and confused to throw them accurately enough. It was easy for the enemy to dodge, only one card hit him on the shoulder, but quite decently. Clutching the wound with his other hand, Kanoji realized that he could not feel his limb. Had the boy managed to cut his nerve? Naruto, finish him off now. Or he'll kill you. The Ninetales barked so loudly that Naruto pulled out another card like a bullet and threw it at his enemy. Put the chakra into your feet as if walking on water, so as not to stick. Act. Shadow cloning technique. He exclaimed, making a seal of concentration. 2 clones instantly appeared on either side of the Nukenin. One grabbed Kanoji by the arm, the other hung on his leg. Naruto himself, not remembering himself, rushed forward, doing as Kurama said, which allowed him not to stick to the ground. While moving he picked up the kukri stuck in the ground and ran into the enemy. Naruto's blue eyes flashed with cold rage. Doubts disappeared quickly, like traces of breath on a mirror. The hand tightened its grip on the handle of the weapon, which seemed to serve as an extension of his hand. Everything happened again, just like that time in the park. He didn't remember how many times he hit the enemy. First, there followed a series of stabbing blows to the stomach and chest, and then, as soon as the enemy, turned into a sieve and long since killed, fell to his knees, the Jinchuriki swung with a loud cry and, putting all his strength into the blow, cut off the Nuken's head. Separating from the body, it flew to the side, rolling across the grass and leaving a red trail behind it. A fountain of blood shot into the air before the body collapsed onto the grass. And the boy with a weapon in his hand, all smeared with blood, looked at what had been accomplished without much regret. He looked up to find that Sasuke, who had come to his senses, froze as he witnessed the spectacle. What the? Amaya squeezed out, tearing the leg with the blade out of Hatake's stomach and freezing at the sight of such cruelty. These few moments of delay were enough for Kakashi to gather all his strength and strike the final blow. His hand was saturated with chirping lightning, and the next moment the kunoichi stabbed right into the heart. When she opened her eyes, she saw a blurry figure above her. A few seconds later, her vision was restored, and Mikoto was very surprised to see Sasuke, on whose face for the first time, instead of a gloomy and indifferent expression, there was concern. Wincing from the pain, which gradually subsided, still spreading throughout her body in the form of an extremely unpleasant tingling sensation, the Uchiha rose a little and sat down, leaning on the ground with her hand so as not to fall back. She had not yet fully recovered and felt herself being pulled back into the darkness of unconsciousness. But the girl couldn't afford to switch off again. Perhaps the enemies were still somewhere nearby, and she would have to fight again, protecting herself and her comrades. Although the tingling sensation throughout her body that was gradually disappearing, but still not leaving her, and her half-depleted supply of chakra could prevent her from beating at full strength. She quickly looked around, reaching with her free hand to the kunai holster on her hip. "Calm down, it's over," Sasuke told her, looking carefully into Mikoto's eyes. "You were hurt by your own equipment. Are you okay?" "It seems so," the girl muttered uncertainly, looking at the Uchiha, whose nose was bleeding and whose face was some incomprehensible pale shade. "And you?" The brunette limited himself to a nod. Addressing him, Mikoto made an effort to keep her voice from trembling. The fear that gripped her from the very beginning of the first deadly battle in her life had not yet passed, manifesting itself in a barely noticeable trembling in her legs. And although the Uchiha managed to overcome it in order to rush straight at the enemy, she was far from the calm that should have been inherent in any shinobi before possible death in battle. In those moments, she realized why the third had hesitated before sending them on such a mission. The wise old man knew what dangers such a journey would pose to the genin and their teacher. And although Mikoto did not show it, hiding the doubts that had crept into her soul, she knew and was convinced a few minutes earlier that she was not ready for such tests. She was just a girl who loved flowers, animals, soft toys, communication with friends, sweets, kind and gentle, somewhat fragile. She doubted that violence and bloodshed, things on which the cruel world of shinobi was based, which showed its true colors after our heroes left the village walls, were really necessary. Maybe it would be even better to fail the mission and just give the scroll to the nuke nin. Naruto and Kakashi-sensei. Are they intact? Mikoto quickly asked, deciding to distract herself from thoughts that would certainly seem stupid to her teammates. Gathering her strength, she rose to her feet, and Sasuke helpfully offered her his shoulder, helping her stay on them. "Thank you." "Yes. But it would be better for you not to see this," he muttered in a rather strange voice. In Sasuke's eyes, Mikoto recognized something familiar. It seemed that it was the uncertainty and doubt that she hid so carefully, trying to appear brave and strong. This seemed more than strange to the girl, since Sasuke did not look like a person who was ever unsure of something. Very soon she realized what was going on. As he and Sasuke slowly and carefully crossed the clearing step by step, Mikoto's gaze fell on the headless body, literally mangled by many blows. Letting go of Sasuke, the girl fell to her knees, closing her eyes and overcoming the urge to vomit caused by this terrible sight. Mikoto, the Uchiha, leaned over her again to help her get up, but she stopped him with a gesture of her hand, making it clear that she still needed some time. Sasuke nodded understandingly and, glancing at Kanoji's mutilated body, which had already ceased to cause horror in him, turned his gaze to where something even more terrible was happening. Kakashi, who had taken off his vest to treat his wound, stood over Amaya's body, watching the actions of Naruto, who out of the blue suggested a rather creepy method for removing the scroll. Squatting next to the girl's corpse, Uzumaki, covered in the blood of his previous victim, raised his blade. A cold blue glint flashed in his eyes, after which the blonde struck, and then pulled it towards himself, ripping open the green-haired girl's stomach. Hatake looked away, realizing that he had made a mistake by allowing the Uzumaki to carry out his plan. Naruto had already done too many out of the ordinary lately. And where does this genin, who seemed like an ordinary boy, get so much cruelty from? Naturally, the copy ninja was informed of what Naruto had experienced and done in the past. But both the Jounin and the third Hokage had hoped that all these terrible things remained there. Now Hatake knew for sure, the events of the past had forever left an indelible mark on the boy's mind. And all the cruelty that immediately splashed out on Kanoji in this battle was probably already forever ingrained in the boy, turning him into a ruthless killer. And now Uzumaki acted without thinking. And Kakashi began to suspect that someone was directing his actions. Really, the Nine Tails? Flashed through the copy ninja's head. Sasuke grimaced, watching from afar as Naruto delved into the insides of the finished-off Kakashi Kunoichi. Now he fully justified the nickname that the villagers awarded him, Demon. You really are not a person if you are capable of this. You have become the same as Itachi, the brunette thought. And will I really have to become the same in order to kill my brother? During this time, Mikoto, who had come to her senses, stood up, and the Uchiha, noticing this, managed to block her view at the last moment. Realizing that it was better to turn away, the girl did so. Naruto did this? She squeezed out, realizing what was happening. Yes, Sasuke answered, not taking his eyes off the blonde, who removed a small scroll from Amaya's stomach. I don't know what came over him. The girl sighed, not daring to turn around. She remembered what they were talking about Naruto at the academy after that incident in the park. He was called a butcher, a murderer and a monster for what he did. But the Uchiha, seeing Naruto differently, believed with all her heart that it was an accident, that he was defending himself this way. When they became one team, the events of the past seemed to be forgotten, and Naruto seemed completely different to her, an ordinary magician boy, not parting with his cards, who, among other things, had a good sense of humor. She liked him. But after what happened, she didn't even know what to think. Were the Naruto-hating villagers right about him being a demon? Sasuke paused for a moment and then added. On the other hand, if he hadn't done it, you and I would be dead. Done, Naruto said. Standing up and turning to the teacher with a satisfied smile, he showed him the scroll lying on his open palm. I think I can return it to its original form. It seems that I managed to copy this Kunoichi's technique. Hatake stared for several seconds at Naruto's blood-splattered face, which showed not the slightest bit of disgust at what he had just done. The copy ninja sighed, thinking that this is exactly what a shinobi should be like in this cruel world. But is this how the first Hokage, who bequeathed them the will of fire, wanted to see his descendants? Go ahead, the Jonin nodded, and then Naruto pulled out the card into which he accidentally sealed Amaya's technique, after which he listened to the instructions given to him by Kurama, who had been in charge of the process of extracting the scroll from the very beginning, and got down to business. He concentrated, formed a seal of concentration, and the next moment the compression technique was deactivated, allowing the scroll to return to its original form. Handing the scroll to the teacher, Naruto looked back at the kukri lying on the ground near Amaya's body, bent down and picked up the weapon. I'll keep it as a trophy, thought Uzumaki, thinking that it would be nice to remove the sheath from Kanoji's body. Heading towards the second corpse, the boy ran into his teammates. Seeing Mikoto, unharmed but with her back to him, he smiled, feeling relieved. Are you okay? He asked. Sasuke nodded. Mikoto, turning to him and looking into his blue eyes, in which cheerful sparkles danced calmly, answered. In full. Thank you, you saved us. The Uzumaki shook his head. No need, we did our best. I just took advantage of the moment. He bent over Kanoji's corpse and unfastened the sheath from the kukri. Sasuke and Mikoto watched their teammates' actions, expecting him to show at least some emotion towards the killed man, but this did not happen. For Naruto, not only a defeated, but also a mutilated enemy was nothing more than a piece of meat. What? He asked, getting up and noticing the Uchiha's glances at him. It definitely was. Mikoto couldn't finish her question and turned away again, looking up at the sky. Kill? The blonde asked, at first not understanding what was the matter, and then realizing from Sasuke's gaze that it was not about the actual fact of committing the murder, but about the method. Naruto instantly understood the reason for the girl's strange behavior and guessed what she was thinking about him now. Everything fell into place and, looking at the fruits of his labors with different eyes, Uzumaki himself hastened to turn away. It was as if he remembered something that he had forgotten while he was mercilessly dealing with the enemy and taking out the scroll from Amaya's corpse. I'm sorry, Uzumaki said, not knowing how to explain himself. I was just too scared. Good excuse, cretin, Kurama grinned. I got scared and chopped it into mince. Mikoto again cast a doubtful glance at the boy and was forced to admit that she herself, scared, rushed at the enemy, intending to finish him off. Part of her understood that Naruto was not to blame for what happened. He couldn't control himself. But the manner in which he dealt with the Nuke still inspired horror. The two images of Uzumaki that were now in the girl's head did not fit together in any way. Kakashi came to the rescue, finishing treating the wound and putting on his vest again. He hid his Sharingan under his protector and, putting the scroll with traces of blood in his pocket, turned to the guys. We need to finish the mission. We'll arrive at the village, wash off and treat the wounds again, Hatake said. And we'll have a snack. However, Mikoto did not imagine that she would be able to eat anything anytime soon. Kakashi quickly made the seals and, biting his finger, slammed his palm onto the ground. A small dog appeared from the white smoke in front of him. That's why the genin were surprised when the animal spoke. Kakashi, how can I help you? Hatake smiled under his mask, looking at the amazed faces of the students. Meet Pakken, my faithful assistant. Pakken, this is Sasuke, Naruto and Mikoto, my students. We need to get back to the road leading to the village. Can you take us to her? Asked the copy ninja. The dog sniffled and, nodding, turned around and ran into the forest. Follow me. Hatake was the first to rush after his assistant. The students followed the sensei, each thinking about his own. Naruto thought that he was now ready for serious fights and would probably be more calm next time. Mikoto, in order to quickly forget about what she had seen, dreamed of taking a bath as soon as possible. And Sasuke, periodically glancing at Naruto, did not know whether to despise him or envy him. And the observer sitting on a branch, whose camouflage disappeared as soon as team number 7 set off, watched them with a thoughtful look, after which he jumped down and turned into many snakes, hissing and crawling in different directions. Amaya and Kanoji never returned, Conan muttered a little worriedly, entering a gloomy round room, the darkness of which was only dispersed by the glowing displays of various equipment. A man hiding in the darkness in a strange device resembling a chair opened his eyes, looking at the guest through his bangs falling over his face. For a moment, the coldness in his gaze dissipated. But, however, he returned just as quickly. And they won't come back. I assumed they weren't strong enough to join Akatsuki, he responded, not at all surprised. It seems Pain didn't care what fate befell the two Rain Jonin he sent on the mission. The blue-haired girl looked into the eyes of the man chained to the strange apparatus and skinny as a skeleton and was horrified to see indifference there. 2 is a small price to pay for the village to prosper, Nagato explained. I think the Konoha team didn't realize who actually attacked them. These two were quite skilled at undercover work. There are no worthy candidates among our shinobi. This is not where you should look for new members for Akatsuki, she said, deciding that in this way she would protect her other subordinates from possible participation in Pain's secret operations. The man nodded slightly, not immediately agreeing with this. In the old days, the organization consisted only of Rain people. But perhaps Conan is right, and there are no more ninjas as strong as they are loyal in the village. Many years have passed since the coup and overthrow of Hanzo, when many Akatsuki members sacrificed themselves for a good cause, but the organization has never been able to regain its strength. Everything changed when a mysterious masked man appeared, causing Akatsuki to become something else and never return to its roots, which Pain so desired, once again filling the organization with compatriots who shared its original goal. Nagato, did he talk to you again? The blue-haired Kunoichi asked, noticing the anxiety in the man's eyes. Did he give any orders? No, it's okay, Pain answered coldly, not wanting to start this conversation. The girl looked away from her amber eyes. And it fell on one of the translucent coffin-shaped chambers, 6 of which, connected through wires to the network, stretched along the wall. "Itachi has arrived on your orders," she said. "Send him after the Nine Tails." He couldn't go far. The next moment, the lid of one of the coffins opened, and a figure in a black cloak with red clouds stepped out, a red-haired man with a piercing on his face. "No. The Nine Tails doesn't interest me right now. I just wanted to check what he's capable of," Pain told her, no longer with his own lips. "There is no need to get ahead of events. But if Toby finds out," she looked from Tendo's body to Nagato. "I'm not going to be the masked man's obedient dog and bring him every ball I find," Pain's body interrupted her harshly, walking past her to the door. Before leaving, Tendo Pain turned around. "Taking the initiative in catching the tailed ones is not part of my plans, Conan. I will only do this when Madara himself gives me an order. It seems to me that you have already forgotten what we did before he came. And I forgot about my doubts about what had become of what you, me, and Yahiko had created with such labor." Conan glanced at the closed door, then turned it to Nagato. "Do you want to contradict Madara?" "I think it's a bad idea," she turned to him. "I won't argue," he answered. "For now. Even though he is the one pulling the strings, it is still my organization, not his." After that, Nagato fell silent, switching to a conversation with Itachi in the next room. The Uchiha was already waiting for him, standing opposite the missing wall and thoughtfully watching how the endless rain drummed on the balcony and the creepy gargoyle growing out of it. The dark-haired man had not changed in recent years, except that his hair, tied in a ponytail, had become a little longer. The Uchiha was wearing a uniform Akatsuki cloak, and on his forehead was a bandage with the Konoha protector crossed out. There were no red lights burning in his black eyes now, but there was some kind of melancholy and thoughtfulness. When Pain appeared, the Uchiha turned to him, bowing his head in respect. He interrupted him with a gesture of his hand. "There is no need for that, my friend," he said rather coldly, but not in the tone in which he usually addressed his subordinates. "Did you do what I asked?" The Uchiha nodded and, putting his hand into his bosom, pulled out a scroll from there, handing it to the Akatsuki leader. "Have you received new orders from Madara?" Itachi asked, looking carefully into Pain's face, which did not express any emotion. "Yes. He wants us to get started," the man with the piercing said, glancing at the door out of the corner of his eye and making sure that it was closed, and Conan could not hear anything. "He didn't name the goal, but I guess the most logical thing would be to seal the One Tail." The dark-haired Akatsuki nodded again. "This is not good," he said. "Did Madara inform you about when he would open up to the organization?" "Only you and I and Conan know about him." Pain shook his head. "And this is alarming. We both know how many secrets he has." "Well, let's not keep him waiting, then Kisame and I will get on with it," he said. "Let's grab Shikaku and take him to the shelter. I wanted to entrust this mission to Sasori and Deidara. But since you agree, go ahead." Itachi nodded and moved towards the balcony to leave the tower in the fastest way possible. "There's something else you should know," Pain stopped him at the last moment. The Uchiha, whose cloak instantly became wet in the rain, looked back. "Nine Tails. Just recently he was here nearby. And your brother was with him." "Sasuke?" Akatsuki from Konoha was surprised. "I sent 2 of my people after Kyubi, ordering them not to touch anyone except the Jinchuriki. They disappeared and never reported their successes, apparently failing. My agents are probably dead, and the Jinchuriki is safe and sound," Pain explained, looking at the man in the cloak, not paying any attention to the rain. "If I had turned to someone from Akatsuki, everything could have ended badly for Sasuke. There's no point in chasing the Nine Tails again since Madara hasn't given us specific instructions." Let him live, we'll catch him when your brother isn't around. Thank you, the Uchiha said, nodding gratefully. I will repay you for this. The next moment he jumped from the balcony, leaping straight into the abyss of the cramped streets below. The traveler's quiet footsteps echoed along the dark corridor of Orochimaru's underground hideout, also known as the Hidden Sound Village. The dungeon was provided with all amenities, including water and electricity. However, the corridors were illuminated with torches, which gave them some kind of ominous mystery. The scientist caught Kabuto autopsying a corpse. The body belonged to a person who did not survive the second transformation of the cursed mark. It lay on a table in the center of the hall, almost a complete copy of Orochimaru's laboratory at the root base in Konoha. Kabuto, as always dressed in a dark purple shirt and trousers, wearing round glasses and a protector with a sound symbol on his forehead, spun around the operating table, skillfully wielding instruments. When Orochimaru appeared, he was forced to break away from his work. You have returned, Orochimaru-sama. The Snake Sanin's faithful assistant bowed his head in respect as a man with long black hair entered the laboratory. He knew where the Sannin had gone shortly after arriving from Konoha, but he didn't know why. It was impressive how quickly the shinobi scientist covered such long distances. How has the research progressed these 2 days, Kabuto? Orochimaru asked, noticing the pleased sparkle in the eyes of his subordinate. He adjusted his glasses with a movement that had long become a habit. Shin. He exceeded all our expectations, Yakushi grinned. But it's better for you to see it yourself. I think Danzo-sama will be pleased with the work done. Orochimaru grimaced at the mention of Danzo, because he did not like to think about him often, and now Kabuto reminded him very inappropriately. The research being carried out was a very important work, not because the head of the root insisted on its speedy completion. First of all, it was important for Orochimaru because he was making a real scientific breakthrough. I hope the search for a new body was successful? Yakushi asked cautiously, guessing at random about the purpose of his mentor's journey and hitting the bull's eye. Uchiha Sasuke. He's pretty good, the Sannin hissed, either turning to Kabuto or talking to himself. However, I found something more valuable. Uzumaki Naruto. Truly an extremely curious boy with exceptional talents. Now I understand why Danzo wants him so much. Orochimaru fell silent, continuing his reasoning mentally. During these 2 days, he really collected valuable information and did not regret the time spent at all. Had he sent his subordinates, many details might have remained unknown. And now the Sannin was confident in what he had seen and knew that Naruto was capable of using the technique that saved Mikoto Uchiha and returned her to her young body. However, how exactly he managed to change the jutsu that he sealed into the card remained unclear. Show me Shin, Orochimaru demanded, interrupting his dialogue with himself. Kabuto nodded, not protesting that he was busy with something important. Taking off his gloves and washing his hands in a specially designed sink in the corner of the room, he moved towards the exit, motioning for his mentor to follow him. Very soon, all the business of Team Number 7 in the Country of Birds was completed. In addition to delivering the scroll to the client, the shinobi were able to take a break after a difficult battle. The respite was expressed in 2 days off in Toragakure, the place that was the destination on their difficult journey. This place was different from Konoha in its sophistication in every way. First of all, in the architectural style. 2-story, 3-story and even 5-story pagodas with bright white, blue and green walls and red roofs here did not serve as temples, but served as residential buildings. Stone-paved paths. Marvelous gardens, bright festive garlands stretched over the streets and other unusual things delighted the eyes of travelers. Here our heroes were able to visit hot springs, taste amazingly delicious rolls and dango, and even buy a couple of souvenirs as a keepsake. By the way, Naruto managed to earn a little extra money, since local residents in the eateries they visited willingly played cards with him, believing that the boy could not beat experienced players. Imagine the surprise of Kakashi, Mikoto, and Sasuke when the third player left with his head bowed and a shameful look, leaving the young Uzumaki with a bag of coins. Fortunately, the blonde was not able to get carried away with this activity seriously, since Kurama warned him of possible troubles if he ran into particularly aggressive fellow card players, who would be sure that the boy had cheated and would try to return what they had lost by force. There were almost no shinobi in this village, and there was no point in fearing for their lives, but Naruto understood perfectly well that Kakashi would not want to arrange at least some kind of showdown in the place where they ended up because of the mission. So, having won enough to provide himself with a couple of new decks of cards and money for food for the next month, Uzumaki stopped using his talents in card games. After going to the hot springs for the second time and having a hearty snack of ramen, the travelers headed back to Konoha. Fortunately, on the way back, for which a longer and safer route was chosen, nothing special happened to the young genin and their mentor. They again had to spend the night in the forest and get up early in the morning, but by the next night the travelers returned to Konoha. They say it's true, visiting is good, but home is better, Mikoto smiled, feeling peace and tranquility within the walls of her native village. It's true, the ramen here tastes better, Naruto nodded, thinking that he could now easily afford the best ramen in Ichiraku. Don't rush into this, first you need to report to Mr. Third about the successful completion of the mission, Kakashi reminded him. Sasuke, looking at the disappointed Naruto, grinned. But then, when his stomach began to growl, he looked away and sighed. After a calm but exhausting journey back, he himself would not mind having a snack and a good night's sleep. The Hokage was waiting for them in his office. Sitting in an armchair, he, as usual, smoked his pipe. When Team 7 appeared before him, he put it down and breathed a sigh of relief. I'm already starting to worry, the old man muttered, his gaze lingering on each of the genin before turning it to Kakashi. I apologize for the delay. It seemed to me that it wouldn't hurt for the guys to get to know the culture of Toragakure better. We had some problems during the mission, but we managed to overcome them, we worked like a real team, he explained. I think it was a very valuable experience. Wonderful, nodded the third and, handing the genin payment for the mission, said that they could be free. Kakashi, I'll ask you to stay. When the door closed behind the genin, the third turned to the jounin again. Tell me in more detail what exactly happened. After leaving the Hokage residence, the genin said goodbye to each other and went about their business. Naruto, looking after the departing Mikoto and Sasuke, looked up at the clear starry sky, so different from the clouds in the vicinity of Amigakure, which covered all the celestial spheres both day and night. I don't think Ichiraku is working yet, he belatedly realized, turning his gaze to the street, illuminated by many lanterns. Idiot. You're always thinking about food. Kurama growled displeased. What else should I think about? About you? Naruto responded mentally, noting with pleasure that he immediately fell silent. Somewhere out there, Sunagakure, a village in the sands, was bathed, as always, in the merciless rays of sunlight. Heat was common in these parts, but for guests in the inhospitable land of the wind it turned into real torment. Two figures in black cloaks crossed the lifeless sand-covered expanses. Where there was not a tree, not even a small cactus. On the heads of the travelers were hats with ribbons coming down from under the edges, saving Akatsuki from the merciless heavenly body. The first shinobi was of average height, with black eyes visible from under his hat, looking only forward. This man was taciturn, he was completely focused on the goal. His partner, a giant compared to Itachi, behind whose back one could discern the hilt of a huge sword wrapped in bandages, had an amazing appearance. Being fish-like in appearance, the blue-skinned thug felt like a small fish thrown onto the shore by a merciless wave in the scorching sun. His little eyes scanned the horizon, wanting to quickly find the great stepped walls that surrounded Suna. Sasori-san, together with Deidara, could easily take care of the one-tails instead of us, muttered Kisame. Could. But Pain-sama insisted that we do it, Itachi responded, narrowing his eyes as the familiar walls of the village appeared ahead, lost in the rising sandstorm. The Uchiha had already been here on a mission, while still a Konoha Chunin. Very soon the ninja, not afraid of anything, drowned in the sandy haze that flew over them, thus hiding from the shinobi who were guarding the entrance to Sunagakure, which was a crack in the wall. "I think I saw something," muttered the dark-haired guard ninja at the very top of the stepped wall, taking his binoculars from his eyes and looking thoughtfully into the cloud of sand that hid two black dots in the distance. "You imagined something last time too," his comrade, located one step below, grinned, scratching the back of his head. "Okay, let's go check it out, but only after the sandstorm ends." "What do you have there?" asked the kunoichi, finishing her walk along the wall at its very foot. But before the two talkers and the rest of the shinobi could react to her question, a dark shadow appeared behind the kunoichi. The next moment, the dark figure behind her brought a blade to her throat and struck it, instantly cutting the victim's throat. The girl fell to her knees, making something between a wheeze and a gurgle, and seeing the sand, sprinkled with her own blood, for the last time in her life. At the same moment, the shadow behind her disappeared, leaving the victim alone. "Kiriko!" the shinobi exclaimed, noticing that the guard was lying dead on the sand, and starting to jump down with weapons in their hands. Peering into the sand curtain, which approached Suna as much as possible, the ninja did not immediately notice the fog added to it, covering those who came after the one-tailed one. The next moment, the ninja froze in place, experiencing a strong desire to rub their eyes. Something resembling a wave was coming at them straight from the desert. However, it turned out to be a wave. Having reached a height of about 15 meters, the water crest fell on the sand wall and its guards, hitting them against each other and washing them down. "Anxiety! Sound the alarm!" one of the ninja shouted, spitting out water. But when he opened his eyes and looked at the very top of the Great Wall, he saw someone in a black cloak with red clouds deftly dealing with the shinobi attacking him. Itachi was so fast and swift that his enemies did not even have time to strike him. Having dealt with the two Chunin using only kunai, the Uchiha turned around as he noticed a new threat out of the corner of his eye. Some shinobi was aiming at him, about to throw a shuriken. After the shuriken was sent flying, Itachi blinked, activating his Sharingan. Seeing those eyes, the enemy froze in place, caught in a genjutsu. The Uchiha narrowed his eyes and, throwing up a kunai stained with the blood of his enemies, grabbed it by the tip of the blade, and then threw it towards the projectile flying at him. Akatsuki was famous for being a master in the use of thrown weapons. The kunai, hitting the shuriken, made it fly in the opposite direction and pierce right into its owner's forehead, after which he fell dead, sliding off the edge of the wall and falling into a crack in the fence, a narrow passage in Sunagakure. And then the observer flinched. As his view was blocked by Kisame looming over him with a huge bandaged sword raised to strike. The ninja felt weak and insignificant, as if something had drained a large amount of chakra from him. "Hello," Kisame smiled, revealing small triangular shark teeth in a predatory grin. This was the last thing the guard saw and heard in his life. What is this?" squeezed out the shinobi, who was about to speak out against the intruders, but suddenly froze in place. His comrades also froze, as if stuck to the spot. Their mouths opened in surprise and their eyes widened in horror. A giant wave was approaching the brave defenders of Suna, appearing right in the middle of the village, literally out of nowhere. Under other circumstances, the ninja would have been delighted with such an amount of water, which in these desert regions had a much higher price than in other countries, but now, when all these innumerable cubic meters shot up and rushed towards them in the form of a ridge, circumstances changed. Right before the ninja's eyes, the water demolished several buildings, turning them back into shapeless sand that settled on the ground, swallowed the residents who did not have time to escape, and with a threatening roar continued its movement, only increasing in size. "Who can create so much water from nothing?" whispered one of the observers, who thought that the technique could be stopped with the help of some kind of stone wall. However, the size of the jutsu raised doubts that this idea would work. "Let's run," blurted out the first shinobi, whose legs began to shake treacherously, after which, turning 180 degrees, he rushed in the opposite direction, shouting at the top of his lungs to warn the residents who were in their homes. His comrades did not become heroes and rushed after him, hoping for a miracle. And the wave followed them on their heels, destroying everything in its path. "It's a pathetic sight," Kisame muttered, looking appraisingly at the space he had cleared as soon as he and Itachi emerged from the crevice in the wall that represented the only entrance to and exit from Suna. "So, you see, there will be nothing left of the village," the second Akatsuki commented on what he saw, looking around at the consequences of the technique as it continued its movement deeper into Suna. Suddenly the water ridge trembled, as if it had met some more significant obstacle in its path, and then the water fell onto the sand, spreading over it, partially seeping into it, and partially evaporating in the scorching sun. Kisame and Itachi looked at each other, turning their gaze to where Hoshigaki's technique was interrupted. What they saw would make any treasure hunter choke on his own snot. It was a huge wall of gold, glistening in the sun. An incredible jutsu stretching across the entire width of the village, the likes of which neither Uchiha nor Kisame had ever seen in their lives, immediately extinguished Kisame's wave. Before the Akatsuki had time to approach the barrier, it suddenly broke up into many shiny particles and, having formed into a cloud, hovered in the sky above the half-destroyed village. A man in a black shirt and trousers with brown hair and eyes throwing lightning, who appeared in front of the enemies as soon as the barrier transformed into a new form, stepped towards them. Hoshigaki grinned as he felt the hilt of the sword in his hand shake with anticipation. This meant that their new enemy had a huge reserve of chakra. And Samahata couldn't resist feasting on the energy of someone like that. "Well, we finally got someone worthy of our attention. Apparently, this is our Jinchuriki," the swordsman said, licking his lips and throwing his sword over his shoulder. He did not take his admiring, predatory gaze off the daredevil approaching them. No, the Uchiha disappointed him, carefully watching the man in black with the help of activated Sharingans. "I heard about a shinobi who can manipulate gold. It appears to be none other than the fourth Kazekage himself." The shinobi stopped 10 meters in front of them. "You're not mistaken, Itachi Uchiha. I am Raza, the fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure. But I also have some information," he replied, having heard Akatsuki's last remark. "I know who you are. And I know that Konoha will pay well for your head." Kisame laughed, surprised how their interlocutor managed to keep such a straight face while making bold threats against his partner. "And you, Kisame Hoshigaki, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, will pay for what you did to my village," Raza continued in an equally cold voice. The Uchiha glanced sideways at his partner and found that Hoshigaki's predatory smile had become even more predatory. Sparkles flashed in the small eyes. "Suna is in the hands of a real shinobi. You don't lack for courage, race. But remember, your self-confidence will destroy you." Hoshigaki turned to the Kazekage. The fourth calmly turned his gaze to the Uchiha. "I know why you are here. And rest assured, Shikaku is safely hidden and you will not get it," he said. "You talk a lot." Kisame was offended by the complete disregard addressed to him. Itachi never expected him to lose his temper so quickly and rush forward. The sword instantly jumped from his shoulder, a lightning-fast swing preceded an equally fast strike, which seemed impossible given the size of this weapon. But Raza turned out to be faster and deftly jumped back a meter, dodging the attack an instant before the bandaged Samahata cut through the air with a roar. The next moment, the fourth Kazekage jumped back again before jumping into the air, landing on a small cloud of golden sand hovering there. He raised his hand up, and then sharply lowered it, pointing his palm at the enemies, and the next moment all the golden grains of sand hanging in a cloud over the dilapidated Suna rushed into 2 Akatsuki, connecting with each other and turning into giant cylinders with sharp points like spears, tips. Now it was Itachi and Kisame's turn to retreat, and several shells, without hitting the target, crashed into the sand, turning into several piles of gold. The fourth Kazekage was not taken aback and made several new movements with his hands, after which the figures of golden sand flying from the sky turned into a single stream of grains of sand and, instead of covering the two Akatsuki, began to surround them, spinning around the Nuke-nin in the form of a whole whirlwind. Kisame swore, wincing at the particles of gold that got into his eyes. Itachi was smarter, so he simply closed them. Meanwhile, the tornado of golden sand surrounding Akatsuki began to narrow, scratching victims and stripping their clothes. Raza grinned contentedly, knowing for sure that in a couple of moments the two shinobi would simply turn into mincemeat. But suddenly a red-orange flash exploded into a whirlwind of crushed gold from within. The Uchiha, as well as his partner, were safe and sound. They were inside the rib cage of a gigantic translucent skeleton that protruded from the ground waist deep. The demonic technique inspired horror by its very appearance, and also did not allow the gold to reach Kisame and Itachi, serving as absolute protection for them. "Susanoo," Itachi whispered, a bloody tear rolling down his cheek from his eye. Yellow lights lit up in the empty eye sockets of Susanoo's ghostly skull, after which translucent muscle tissue appeared on the skeleton, and armor and a cape appeared on top of them. In one of the four hands, Tatsuka's sword flashed with furious fire. Kisame, who saw this technique of his partner for the first time, glanced in surprise at Itachi, who concentrated his gaze on the enemy, who continued his futile attempts to attack them with golden sand from afar. The swordsman felt an unpleasant cold spreading throughout his body. Susanoo felt uncomfortable inside. The Uchiha gave a mental command, and the ghostly warrior swung his sword, bringing the formidable weapon down on the fourth Kazekage. But again the enemy was too fast. The cloud on which he was floating flew away, and Raza was unharmed. Throwing an appraising glance at Susanoo, Suna's leader decided to change his strategy, again making some passes with his hands. Before Kisame and Itachi could blink an eye, golden sand began to cover them from all sides, turning into a whole pyramid. "This is bad," muttered the Uchiha, guessing what the race was planning. The only question was whether the fourth sealing technique would work on Susanoo. "I'll take care of it," Kisame grinned, tearing off the bandages from Samehada and rushing towards the enemy. He jumped out of the ghostly warrior through a gap in the pyramid of gold that had not yet had time to close and, surprising the enemy with his sudden appearance, struck a blow that the hesitant Kazekage could not dodge. The sword's spikes tore through Fourth's clothing and left several bleeding scratches. He himself flew back and fell into a pile of his own golden sand, which, following the wishes of the owner, turned into something like a pillow. Itachi, no longer in danger of the enemy's interrupted sealing technique, dispelled Susanoo and jumped out before being overwhelmed by the remnants of the race's jutsu. "I'll sort this out," Kisame told him, looking over his shoulder. "Find the Jinchuriki." The Uchiha nodded briefly and rushed to the surviving part of the village. The rising Kazekage wanted to stop him, but a powerful jet of water crashed into him, knocking the man over again. Water release, water projectile technique. With satisfaction in his eyes, Kisame wiped the water flowing from his lips with the sleeve of his cloak, and then swung his sword, which showed his teeth. "We'll have something to eat, Samehada. However, you've already managed to absorb a lot of this fool's chakra," the swordsman muttered, rewarding the Kazekage rising to his feet with a shark-like smile. "What are you talking about?" he asked, placing his palm on the bleeding wound on his stomach and at the same time thinking through a plan for further action. "My sword sucked a lot of chakra from your techniques, which you so generously showered on us. I think you used up a lot of chakra, but for me it was just a warm-up," Hoshigaki informed him with bloodthirsty superiority shining in his small eyes. The blue-skinned man grabbed the collar of his cloak and pulled the robe off, exposing his torso and showing off his sculpted muscles. The Kazekage saw Samehada's handle change shape, stretching out and wrapping around the owner's wrist, elbow and shoulder. He thought that this was how the sword transferred the sucked chakra to Kisame, but then he realized that things were much worse. Samahata merged with her master, and soon a creature appeared in the eyes of the fourth Kazekage, even less like a human, but more and more reminiscent of a shark. I hate the desert sun, Kisame winced, because now he felt the scorching rays of the heavenly body on his skin much more strongly. Let's play by my rules. Hoshigaki made a seal with both hands, smiling promisingly at his enemy. Water release, dancing shark prison technique. The sand under the feet of the two opponents trembled, and water began to appear from under it. It became more and more. She rose into the air, forming a gradually expanding circular barrier around the Kazekage and Akatsuki. Raza thought that in this way the shark man was going to deprive him of possible help and block all escape routes, but the technique turned out to be much more insidious, as the water level began to gradually rise. The bubble was filling with liquid from the inside, and the head of Suna, before the water rose to the level of his throat in a couple of seconds, managed to take a deep breath. Now he understood why Kisame needed gills, which he noticed immediately during Akatsuki's transformation. The Kazekage thought that with enough effort he could break through the walls of the water-filled bubble and catch up with Itachi, preventing him from reaching Gaara. He looked around, trying to see the retreating figure of the second enemy through the water, but did not see him. Turning back, the fourth realized that he had made a fatal mistake. Kisame was not in his original place. He disappeared somewhere, deciding to attack from an ambush. It is unknown how much this water prison has expanded in these moments. It may already be the size of a quarter of the village. He could be anywhere. Flashed through the head of the man, who, squinting, looked around. The fourth decided that the biggest mistake would be to stay where he was, and swam away, trying to get to the edge of the water-filled bubble. But there was no end to the water, and my eyes were already starting to get dark from lack of air. Something made the Kazekage look back, and then he saw three blurry figures quickly approaching him. Raising his hand towards them, Raza created a golden wall to shield himself from the approaching threat. But, to his disappointment, even his golden sand moved slower than necessary underwater. Two sharks chasing the Kazekage, and it was them, crashed into a barrier that rose from the bottom, dissolving in white smoke. And the third, slightly catching on the golden wall, swam further. Raza saw gaping jaws with many teeth, and then a terrible pain pierced his shoulder, since it was into it that they had sunk. The creature dragged him somewhere along with it, sinking its teeth into the flesh, gnawing into it deeper and deeper. Blood oozed from the wounds, turning the water red. In pain, the Kazekage exhaled all the air he had left and began to choke on water. His ears began to whistle and ring, and the pain became so intense that it blocked out all other senses, including fear. Suddenly the shark's jaws closed with even greater force, and the bone that the small teeth had reached at that moment broke. The predator swam away with Four's bitten limb, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. And Raza, who opened his eyes, suddenly saw Kisame appearing from the bloody haze scattered in the water. "It's time to die," he muttered, feeling great underwater and realizing that the advantage was now completely on his side. His tenacious webbed paw grabbed the Kazekage by the throat, after which Akatsuki threw the almost defeated enemy down, forcing him to crash with his back into the bottom. Having met the sand, the Kazekage raised a pile of dust, which mixed with the water, making it impossible to see anything. But Kisame didn't need that. He felt the warmth of the body of his victim, who remained at the bottom. He rushed down like lightning and, hanging over the man sprawled on the sand, grabbed him again and sent him flying upward. The water killer did not lag behind the Kazekage, appearing from different sides and delivering blows, knocking out the last vestiges of life from him over and over again. After making his seals, Hoshigaki prepared to deliver the final blow using his favorite technique. Water release, shark bomb, but Kisame didn't have time to finish, because his body was seized with a spasm. It seemed as if the blood had frozen in his veins, and his organs were being squeezed by an unknown force. Before he had time to be surprised, the giant bubble prison burst, freeing the two opponents from captivity. The water spilled in all directions, soaking into the sand. Finally, the Kazekage and Akatsuki also found themselves on land. Raza, with the last of his strength, rolled over onto his side, and then onto his stomach, and coughed up the water that filled his lungs. This took some time, followed by shuddering breaths. The man clenched his teeth and, using the last remnants of chakra, stopped the bleeding from the terrible wound, covering it with golden sand. He sat down on his knees with difficulty and pressed his remaining hand into the sand so as not to fall. What did you do?" muttered Kisame, who was lying next to him, without moving. His eyes looked at one point in the sky. "My gold. It mixed with water when I came into contact with the sand. You swallowed particles of gold, and with their help I paralyzed your body. Now you can only move your lips," Raza wheezed. "And now I will kill you if your comrade does not return my son." Hoshigaki hardly forced a mocking smile onto his face. "Oh, so the Jinchuriki is your son? What a pity. This is a bad plan. You don't know Itachi well," Akatsuki told his interlocutor. "Kazekage-sama. Kazekage-sama." Shouts were heard from the surviving part of the village. These shinobi and a squad of doctors rushed to help. A few moments later they were already there. "Shikaku. Where is he?" Suna's leader croaked. "Mr. Gaara is nowhere to be found." As well as the second Akatsuki, Raza received the expected answer. Kisame laughed, but his laughter turned into a wheeze, and then a gurgle. Hoshigaki was choking on his own blood. In an instant, all of his internal organs burst under the influence of golden sand. The Kazekage threw a hateful look at the swordsman, whose body had left life, and then turned to his shinobi. "Search the village again. And send out a patrol." He couldn't have gone far. For the first time, the Suna leader's voice wavered, for he doubted that his men would catch up with Itachi. And the man in a black cloak with a pattern of red clouds was already outside the village. With the red-haired boy slung over his shoulder, who had managed to threaten him with death and immediately immersed in the world of Tsukuyomi, he wandered through the newly raised sandstorm, leaving behind both Suna and Kisame, who sacrificed his life for the good of Akatsuki in their great goal. 2 weeks have passed since our heroes returned from their first mission. They were given some time to rest, and then, when the short vacation was over, they had to return to their usual affairs. These were everyday training and missions within the village that any self-respecting genin could handle. But Sasuke, Naruto, and Mikoto wanted to be in some amazing country again, to experience the spirit of adventure. Kakashi respected his students' desire for new achievements, but all the time referred to the fact that they still needed to learn a lot so as not to lose face on the next mission. Nobody remembered the incident that ended the first serious battle in the lives of the genin. Although sometimes Naruto caught strange looks from his comrades, however, he quickly forgot about it. It seems that despite everything they had been through, they still got along well. We found interesting topics for everyone to talk about, for example, about what Kakashi-sensei looks like under the mask, joked, walked. Training battles with Kakashi-sensei became more fierce. Now each of the genin imagined what a real shinobi battle was like, and strived to become stronger as quickly as possible. Sasuke and Mikoto learned to use the Sharingan awakened on the mission. Kakashi, either by coincidence or according to the original plan of the third, turned out to be exactly the person who could teach them all the intricacies of using dojutsu. However, Hatake has still kept silent about how he got this eye. By another happy coincidence, Mikoto's element and, as it turned out, Sasuke's second element coincided with one of the elements that the sensei owned. The kunoichi, as the mission showed, has already made good progress in mastering electric jutsu. And Sasuke had to learn the basics. He was determined to learn the new technique. Mikoto decided to develop her genjutsu skills, which is why she participated in training with Team Kurenai several times. Well, Naruto, who was not going to lag behind his comrades, continued to expand his arsenal of techniques, and he borrowed some from Kakashi-sensei. Thanks to Mito Uzumaki's amazing sealing technique, Naruto didn't care what element a particular jutsu had. He could just as easily have sealed it into a card and then used it in battle. The third Hokage jokingly nicknamed Team 7 the Copy Squad, because each member could copy almost any technique in one way or another. The old man was convinced that Team Kakashi had great potential. The only thing that was unclear was why he hesitated to send promising genin on a new serious mission. Late in the evening, when everyone had long gone home, only 3 genin were awake, continuing their grueling training. When the sun finally disappeared behind the horizon, and the moon and the lights of the stars shone brightly in the dark sky, Kakashi was forced to say goodbye to his students and leave. However, some of them are also too tired to continue torturing their bodies and souls. "Well, are you coming, Sasuke?" Mikoto Uchiha called out when she and Naruto were getting ready to go home. "I'll catch up with you," the Uchiha responded. He looked at his palm and then clenched it into a fist, concentrating his chakra into it. The fist faintly sparkled with lightning. When this happened, Sasuke took off and ran towards the nearest tree, after which he struck it without hesitation. Chidori. The lightning flashed a little brighter, and a small crack ran along the tree trunk. However, maybe it was an already existing crack in the bark. It was so dark that Naruto couldn't figure it out. Here it is, the Sharingan in action. Sasuke managed to understand the principle of operation of Kakashi's Raikiri, and he was even able to invent his own technique, almost identical to that one. But even with all this knowledge, he will not be able to use this jutsu until his body is adapted to Chidori, Kurama commented on this site. "My cards are much better in this regard," Naruto agreed. "However, without training I'm also not capable of much." Sasuke sighed and returned to his original position, intending to repeat the technique until he completely used up his chakra. "I'll catch up with you," he said, looking back at his friends and returning to his work. "Why is he so persistent?" Naruto asked the Nine Tails. "Isn't it obvious? He doesn't want to give in to you, you idiot," he responded. "Or, to your brother, Itachi?" Naruto shuddered with displeasure, remembering the black shadow with red glowing eyes over the bodies of Sasuke's parents. Yes. At Sasuke's age, he showed incredible progress. As sad as it is, your friend is far from Itachi. And if the one he wants to destroy is Itachi, I feel really sorry for Sasuke, Kurama explained. Uzumaki thought. "I believe in Sasuke. If he wanted something, he would do it no matter what," he thought. "Okay, let's go Naruto," Mikoto suggested, tugging the boy's sleeve, who was immersed in a dialogue with the Nine Tails. "Everything is the same as yesterday." The blonde, returning to reality, nodded. "Let Sasuke continue training as he did yesterday and the day before. Eventually it will bear some fruit." "I'll accompany you," Naruto muttered, nodding, and managed to catch the eye of both Sasuke, who had paused his training, and Mikoto, surprised by this proposal, who eventually simply smiled and nodded. "Okay," she agreed. After saying goodbye to Sasuke, they walked away. They walked halfway in silence until Naruto, a little frightened by Kurama's sudden reproach, jumped in place. "So you're going to go with your mouth sewn shut? Entertain her somehow if you want to arouse her interest." Uzumaki was surprised. And why is Kurama suddenly sharing advice with him on something like this? Does he really care what Naruto feels for the young Uchiha? "What are you doing?" Mikoto grinned, stopping under the lantern, causing the artificial light to illuminate her face and make her eyes sparkle. The blonde frantically searched his memory. And finally it dawned on him. He remembered that Mikoto always liked the tricks he performed with cards. Do you want a trick? Uzumaki suggested and, after waiting for an interested smile and a nod from the girl, he pulled out a card from his trouser pocket. Glancing at the drawing to make sure he didn't accidentally create something terrible like an explosion, Naruto made sure that everything was in order and handed the card to Mikoto. So, what is next? She was surprised. Before Naruto's insidious smile betrayed him, he managed to form a seal of concentration, and instead of a card, a bouquet of flowers appeared in the Uchiha's hand. She shuddered in surprise and almost threw him into the air. You should have seen your face, Uzumaki grinned, thinking that he needed to come up with something even funnier next time. Mikoto waved her bouquet threateningly, although she suddenly changed her mind and, smiling tenderly and standing on her tiptoes, kissed Naruto on the cheek. Now it was his turn to be surprised. Well, Joker, here we are, will you surprise me with something tomorrow? She smiled, pulling away and preparing to turn onto her street. Naruto couldn't help but smile too. For a moment he was torn between surprising Mikoto now with an unexpected return kiss, and refusing this idea, but in the end he preferred the latter. Thinking that there was no need to rush things. Something will think. A few months later. Konoha was surprisingly quiet and calm today.